Welcome to Opportunity Knocks, i.e., I am your host, Matthew, also known as the Rev Raw, and I have returning after some time away one of our favorite co hosts. Well, okay, no problem. And don't forget, keep the mic close to your mouth. So everybody, it's been some time away. We recently are starting our second season. Our first season is about 10 episodes long. We did that short format just to be able to get that first chunk out of the way. Now we are back doing what we got to do. Um, and I'm ready to have like some more some deeper conversations. Hey, folks, you know how it goes. When we get together, we start talking, getting caught up on the things that are going on in the world, and um, recording. But we had gotten together because over the last, I'd say, 6 months or whatever that we've kind of had this podcast going, we've cycled in and out different co-hosts and whatnot, and so we wanted to take a moment and kind of go back to our base and kind of like just have a good old conversation before we start the new summer series that's coming out. Yes, y'all, a summer series. We got together kind of brainstorming what the podcast is going to look like. And because I'm getting out of school in a couple weeks, and right, and finally getting some free time for the summer, we're going to record a bunch of content so that when our next cycle of busyness happens, we can still keep a constant stream of content for you. Um, right. Well, and just to give y'all all just a little snippet, we're going to be talking about some really deep topics. We're going to be talking about grief. Recently we've lost some very close folks on both sides. Angie lost a family member. Right. I lost a close family member lost their spouse, and then we also lost a community member. Rest in peace, Joey. Um, and, and and so we want to talk about some things that really are deeply affecting all of us. Grief being one of those. We also are going to be talking about abortion. Now, that may not be this episode, but soon we're going to be sitting down to have the body debate, to have an actual conversation about what this new attempted legislation means and why it's so important for us, again, to get out to vote and to make sure our voices are heard because this current administration is trying to police our bodies. Can I say that again? And when I say our bodies, I don't mean the men. They are policing the women's bodies. And I'm here in solidarity with my sisters and gender nonconforming siblings who are femme-bodied because it is their choice, it's their decision, um, and men shouldn't be making that choice. We also are going to be talking about, and this is a topic that we're going to talk about a little bit today, about like self-esteem and self-sabotage and getting caught in this cycle of, what happens when your dream dies? Or what happens when you're sabotaging yourself when you could be reaching your highest potential, but instead you get stuck in one position and you can't move forward. Well, yeah, we get deep. We've established ourselves. um, So, y'all, so today we are actually recording in a different location, so that's why the sound may be a little bit different. But we wanted to make sure that we got together and gave you some content since it's been a while. This is going to be our second episode for this season. Our last podcast will recently is going to be coming out by the time this hits the airwaves. It was The topic was Love in a Time of Revolution, where we talked about one, what it looks like getting into relationships right now, as well as what does it look like being in relationship with the planet, with Mother Earth. You know, when it's a time of chaos and distraction, and we're talking about racism and migrant attacks by our administration, and transgender bans, immigrant bans or migrant bans, excuse me, or abortion bans. All these things are happening, and how do we still love the place that we live? How do we still love one another when everything is telling us it's time for us to hate each other, for us to debate what's going on? You know? Exactly. Oh, oh. I'm gonna bring it down. Come on, girl. We know you love Janet. Her birthday just happened. Happy birthday, Miss Jackson. I'm a little nasty. Right. mm. And I do just want to point out, Angie, you may not have heard this right now, but I know that our mics are so amazing. Shout out to Amazon. Although Amazon can be the devil, but I didn't say that. But I didn't say that. Because I literally could just hear the ambulances that are happening in the background. I'm like, woo woo. This is what it's like when you live in the hood. It's a part of our daily life. So for y'all, if you just heard that, we are safe. Most likely that was an ambulance going to assist somebody. Um, but yeah, so today's show. Okay, so first, is there any popular like media stuff that you want to talk about before we get into the deep topics? So let me throw. Which one? Takashi? Poor Takashi. Literally there has not been a whole lot in the media about it, which I'm surprised but not surprised because he's facing some real charges. Like real charges. No, like this is some real like going away time. And what I think is happening right now is one, I think people are trying to distract from that story just because it's something that's too real. And I think too many people came forward originally and was like, look, what he's doing is he's snitching. And snitching is not safe. And but the question is, and this is before we get into the real topic, what is the culture that we are creating when we are telling folks that it's not okay to tell the truth about a situation? The other part of that, though, is he was complicit. He knew what was going on. He says he didn't. Again, I am not legal counsel, so I'm just going to put that out there that I don't know that he really knew what was going on. But for the amount of money that was taken from him and the certain moves that he made, where he suddenly let people go, like he fired them, a lot of it's very suspicious. I pray that his family's okay. I pray that, he is safe, but it all does not look good at this moment. Um, so literally in the media, I have not seen a whole lot about him, and I think again, people are just trying to like not even and give that story any energy anymore. Hmm. Why are you trying to take me there? Why are you trying to take me there? Of his biopic or whatever that thing was? I hadn't heard that they were going to do the part two, but he's been doing too many things leading up to this moment. Like, I don't know if you all saw, this was probably a couple months ago, where literally he had to pay what was it, over $100,000 worth of back child support because he was incarcerated, and then it wasn't even him that actually paid that 100,000. But again, these are people who stand behind him so much. And, recently I was preaching a sermon, and one of the things I talked about is, are we able to separate ourselves and separate the alleged offender from the art that they created? I know for many people that's a hard thing to do. But for me, like, growing up, R. Kelly was a big part of my growing up. Can't go to a cookout without hearing was a step in the name of love. You couldn't go to a church service or a funeral without I believe I can fly. All these like, but Angie, you was 14 once, and you cannot tell me that you did not jam to Aaliyah. Age ain't nothing but a number. A number ain't nothing but a thing. Of course, yes, he wrote that, but again, you cannot tell me that Yo 94, 95 was not lit with that plan. Exactly. Silence. Silence. Or without addiction. Which one? I was gonna say, are you talking about the Ignition remix? This is that remix Ignition. No. Nope. Nope. But see, okay. Wait, hold on. Where you? Oh, well, okay. See, okay, okay. So, this is all I'm gonna say about the other one. This man has been gone for 10 years. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Woody Allen? Who? Oh, Ed. What is it? Yeah. Oh my God. You're gonna make me Google this right in the middle of the podcast. Um, yes. Yep. Yep. We already know. We already know that people have feelings about Black lives. And as host of a podcast who are people of color, we know what this is about. And I mean, yes. I mean, and I'm in just a second. um, well, I wanted to go to the topic that we haven't talked about. Um, and this one hurts. This one's hard because it's been something that has, I'm going to just say it, Jussie Smollett, right? Jussie has, allegedly, allegedly, lied about the hate crime. And there are podcasters that are out there that are saying that he lied. There are folks that are saying, they're not so caught up in the lie per se. They are more caught up in the fact that this is something that can happen and has happened to gay black men that are out every day and no one cares. And it's sad that this man comes forward because he's had this alleged event happen, and the first thing that happens is people are already doubting his story, already don't believe him. They want to say that he was out trying to get drugs at 1 a.m. when people are not taking into consideration. Like if he was on like the East Coast, or if he's used to East Coast living, most places are open till like 4 in the morning, if not open 24 hours a day. And so it gets fishy. I do also know that people take offense to the fact that he was arrested. The city of Chicago basically ruled that he was not guilty of anything, but then folks are wanting to sue him for the time that was invested in his investigation, and it's like this is something that would have been investigated and has been investigated by people who are not of color. Because how many crimes have happened or have allegedly happened because of someone who is saying, some random black man kidnapped me and my kids, or I was raped by 3 black men, and then later that story is retracted. But those 3 men's lives have been impacted. And sometimes, these men have done nothing. They just are 3 random dudes off the street, but because they fit a vague description, and we all look alike, people get arrested and things happen. Yes. Nope. Nope. And and that's the thing. Like I said, with the Jussie Smollett situation, like I am so conflicted because, again, if it is not true, it breaks the heart. But at the same time, it's bringing awareness or more awareness to something that actually does happen. Black gay men in general are targets. And we're not even at the top of the list because there's black trans women. Hmm. Um, I think if I'm not mistaken, the last trans woman that was murdered was what, Malaysia Booker, and that's less than a week ago. We're at, was it almost 30 trans people that have been killed this year, if not more? Yes. That's not including people that were misgendered, misidentified, folks that still have not been found. Like, this is ridiculous. Um, but again, the point is that I'm glad that this was brought to light where more people are asking questions about the experience of the LGBT community and the LGBT community of color. Hmm. 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 Yes. Yes. Now, and again, not to take away, but and not to take away from the work that has been done and what has happened with his legacy. nothing to take away from that because so many good things have happened since then. There's been more visibility. We have RuPaul's Drag Race on regular TV. Like, there have been a lot of like movement forward, but why does it take the one white boy that gets killed tied to a fence post to get the movement going when trans women have been being killed in crazy numbers for years? Well, I think it's because we live in a world where things can't be both and. People always want it to be just one way. Well, when it comes to social justice movement, we're focusing on this one thing right now. So when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, we're only actually talking about Black Lives Matter. It's like, no, when we say that, we're talking about everybody. Everybody's lives matter, but we're focusing on the black ones right now. Or yes. I recently was in a conversation, and I don't want to say where I was. I can't really divulge this person's personal information. Uh-huh. Basically. But I'll say this. I was in a conversation. Well, this is basically so. No, we can't. I'm just gonna say, but in the situation, I had a conversation with someone, and we were talking about reparations, or they brought up reparations, kind of, and they were saying, basically, when's enough enough? And that's not something that's an easy answer. And, when we're looking at the different movements that are happening, and if we can acknowledge and realize that all of our lives are connected and all of our movements are connected and we need one another, that's a problem. And so, again, going back to Jesse, like, I think his story in this situation is about more than what we're giving it. And I think that it's easier to make him a villain than to actually have a conversation and say, hey, these are things that are impacting who we are and what we're doing. And there needs to be some way for us to address these issues and to talk about these things in public. And why does it always have to be only the gay people that are having these conversations? And why are there no allies who are willing to come forward and say, look, we understand that there are people that are hateful in the world. What can we do to help you? Or what can we do to be in this with you? And oh, oh, oh. And to quote the wonderful Jasmine Masters, and I mean, that's it exactly. Like, I think people don't know how to respond and how to act in ways that will help the movement. And I think that what happens is we get caught up in the ways that we think we can help and the ways that we've been doing that extra. Like, I can't be prejudiced or I can't. Huh? Oh, don't even go down that road, girl. Because I can think about them many times that we had to be like, yeah, yes. But anyway, not to get too caught up in these popular topics. The one other one that I did want to bring up was okay. YouTube is changing my life. So Well, it's not really all of a sudden. It's just it's helping me to look at things a little bit differently, and it really has helped me with this topic that we're going to talk about today. So y'all don't judge me. Please don't judge me. Something in my spirit lately has me watching like John Edward, the medium, but also he was on Oprah, but also Yelna Van Zant and Fix My Life. So something has had me kind of really looking deep lately, looking at how I show up in the world when it comes to my spirituality, how I handle this path to ministry, and how I can sabotage myself. And I've had to come to some real deep realizations about who I am as a person and being able to create and put up those boundaries that say, this is my dream and I'm not going to sabotage it. Like, I need to be able to, again, show up when the work needs to get done. And I think so many times when we're out here and we're doing the work, it gets so lonely and we don't always understand that there are folks out there that are willing to help, but also knowing that sometimes there are people that may not understand what we're going through. And so when we were having this conversation before we started, recording, we were talking about, what happens when you've had this dream and maybe this dream is dying, or maybe this isn't where you're supposed to be at in this journey towards this dream at the moment. Or exactly. Right. Right. And it was like so y'all we were having like the tread has basically been worn off. Right. 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 And y'all, we bring this up or we talk about this because one of the things that we were talking about is with this episode, because we are in graduation season, and shout out to all y'all who have graduated. Y'all have made it, whether it's high school, college. Like, well, and what we were talking about is, you know, for some of us, like right now is a crazy time. Um, for myself, I started seminary in 2015, and I am still in it. And most times the program is only a 3-year program, and here I am 4 years later and still not done. And folks who started with me, I'm seeing that they're finishing and they're getting into like their congregations, and I start to think to myself, what am I not doing that's getting me over that hump? What am I not doing that's getting me to the place where I can be successful and keep things going? Um, and so, we thought about talking about self sabotage and what that looks like and why, at a certain point in our lives, we do things or we're put in positions where we're sabotaging ourselves. Oh, so what I was going to say, and this is the one thing I forgot to throw in there real quick. One of the things that we were talking about right before we started recording was the fact that sometimes people are not cut out for college. Right. Like for those of y'all that are probably of a certain age, you probably remember at a certain point in high school, folks were doing other things. Like they would graduate and they would have some kind of trade, whether that's being a mechanic, plumbing. We had talked about, yeah. And we don't really focus on that anymore. Everyone, there's always this push for college, but um, there's no recognition of what happens once college is done. Yeah, you go off and you get your AA, but is your AA getting you a job? And then you go from that AA to get that BA, but once you got that BA, do you get that job? That's and then what happens once you get that master's or beyond? We were talking earlier. We were talking earlier that I think it's 6% of Americans have a master's degree, and of that number, how many people are actually working in the field that's associated with the degree that they've got? What, maybe like 2% or something like that? It's a crazy number, and I do not have the actual number in front of me, so please Google that if y'all want the correct number. And that's true. And, mhm. And it's like we gotta like really wonder like, what happens because I think for myself, I feel like I've been out and doing a lot of the work. And so, as I'm learning and I'm getting more things from school, I'm actually out in the community and doing practical things. And I'm learning more about myself as I move into this, in this world. And for you, I know that there's got to be a lot that you're seeing and noticing and dreams that you have that maybe. Girl, can you dance though? Can you dance though? You gonna go up there and get Janet mad at you. She gonna turn around and throw her mic at you. So get off the stage. She's like, girl. Mhm. 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 And, well, it is, but I think like you know we have to figure out like what is it that is telling us that what we're doing is not good enough, and is telling us that we have to seek out more like education, or we have to be perfect at whatever it is we're doing. You know, because I think that a lot of times that's what that self sabotage is that we think that we must be this perfect representation of whatever this ideal role is, and when we're not perfect, and when we're not, let's say we're not on time for every single meeting, or we're not meeting every single deadline, it's like we feel like suddenly we're inadequate. But I think that's also because we get caught up in this idea of time, and there's never enough time. You know what I mean? Yes. Right. When we talk about birthdays, celebrating birthdays. Times how many? But I mean, that's the thing though. Like, because everything is so like caught up in time, it's almost like we never have enough time. When you think about the traditional person working a job, they're working what, maybe 8 to 10 hours a day, right? That's just the job. Then if they're doing volunteer work, that may be another 4 or 5 hours. If they're married or if they're not married and they have kids, that's another five, six, whatever, however many hours. Exactly. But time is the one thing that we constantly seem to be running out of. Right. And and that's a thing. That's a reality for a lot of people that are working two, three jobs. They have their day job. They have a Uber. They doing Lyft. They doing what's the other thing? Instacart. You know. I remember. Mhm. I remember there was this one day, and please excuse my privilege for 2 seconds. I had my car in the shop, and I needed to get a ride back to the dealership because they were working on my car. My car was done, and I got picked up by a Lyft driver, and literally he was a teacher. He had just finished at school, and then he started his route. And he says, he does that because he makes extra money. He has to kind of wait to drive to his house because he lived like out in Temecula or something. But he taught over here in San Bernardino area. And literally, that was his side hustle. That's how he made extra gas money, where his regular money could go for like his house and other necessities. But again, how much is he really getting paid if he has to Uber to basically get gas money? Yep, he's a teacher. Well, we'd rather pay millions for a distraction than the truth. Hmm. 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 So, can I ask you a real question? So, whatever happened to your career in music? But where's that pressure coming from? Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Well, and I think, well, I want to say it's also, I think it's cultural, but it's hard to say because I think it's really, and like you said, it's this American dream. I think it's become the culture of what an American thinks, that literally we must work ourselves to death in order for us to become successful. And if we're not working ourselves to death, then we have to do our best to become a YouTube star, or we have to do our best to become a reality personality. You know what I mean? Like, there's this weird, like, not real like ideal of who and what we should be doing and becoming. And like I said, there's a lot of this emphasis on education because, again, if you jump off on like Instagram or YouTube and you got these videos and you're allegedly giving this information, then the first thing that people are going to do is they're going to come for your degrees. So like Dr. Umar Johnson, y'all may know or have heard of Dr. Umar Johnson. No, he's allegedly this like Hotep dude. I don't really, yeah, I don't really deal with a lot of what he does because of what he says about the LGBT community. But if you do listen to some of the stuff he says, some of it's like, that's interesting. But again, people first thing that they come for is his degrees because he allegedly has like 7 different degrees, 2 or 3 master's degrees, and it's like, why is he being questioned about his master's degrees? Is it because he's a person of color? Because people of color have several master's degrees. One of the folks at my current seminary, who was like one of my like mentors, she has like 6 or 7 like master's degrees. She's like brilliant. Like her mind, like she's someone that's really changing the world. And why is it so easy to question the qualifications of a person of color as opposed to their counterpart? And again, I know he said some crazy things or some things that, not he even saying that word, but he said some things that are not what is the normal accepted thing. And so suddenly people say, oh, well, what's your education? Hmm. Mhm. Mm. Mhm. 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 And what if, again, what if college isn't right for you? And it's not to say that college isn't for everybody, because, I mean, there's nothing wrong with wanting to continue your education. I'm continuing my education. I'm very much someone that is very much pro school, but I also realize that not everybody wants to keep going to school. Not everybody feels that they have that need. And I think that as a society, we devalue those people that are doing other types of work. Again, before we were recording, we were talking about the fact that, again, when you talk about high schools and how there are certain kids that were always in like the shop class, or they were always doing like the plumbing stuff. There are very specific kids that were treated or were thought to be the problem kids that were always in those programs. And then, they get out of those programs, they graduate, a lot of them go into like mechanic type jobs or as plumbers and things like that. And then in that situation, we're still degrading that job. Plumbers get paid hella money. Like mechanics get paid hella money. And we don't value that. Hmm. Allegedly, because we own a podcast, and I don't want them to come. Okay. Hmm. 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 And, mm, mhm. Well, and again, that's why I said, like, I think it's it's culturally set up, and it's a part of what the American culture is, because literally we are being trained, or we are being taught that unless we have some type of degree, or when we are pursuing our dreams, a lot of times our dreams aren't realistic. And sometimes you have to give up on what that dream looks like just because you're not getting it right now. And again, time. Time is of the essence. If you want to do this thing, then you need to be able to do it right away. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. But I was just gonna say, like, I think it's also about your perspective. Like, if you come in it from the perspective that this wasn't a waste of time, then it won't feel like that. And there is definitely a reason why you would feel that way, and a lot of it could be that you're not feeling fulfilled, if that makes sense. Um, yes. Well, it's not even wrong. Yes. And again, I just think that that's something that we get caught up on because, again, as we were talking about, and y'all, a future episode, we're going to talk about, consumerism and how it's a thing, and how literally it's probably a culture because we've been taught that we must, consume, and that can even be degrees we're consuming, you know. And it's crazy because I keep saying, okay, after I get my master's, I'm debating getting, a PhD because I do love talking about religion. I do love looking at what it means to go back to an earth-based religion. And I think it would be pretty amazing to be the Reverend Doctor, to be just introduced or to walk in the room and be like, this is the Reverend Doctor. I am going to come in and preach the word. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a word that you already know. I'm going to come in and talk about love. I'm going to talk about love. Well, and this is just to give kind of like a heads up to, like, with the work that I'm doing right now in my ministry, like a lot of my sermons are starting to move towards talking about love as our liberation. So hopefully coming up with some of the work that I'm doing with local churches and my own side projects, the new upcoming year theme for me is love is our liberation, because I feel like when we talk about love, love conquers all things. Love conquers fear. I feel like love is a part of who our higher power is. And I think many times we don't look at love as a way to help us move through these type things. So, like, okay, we're talking about self sabotage right now. And the problem of self sabotage is the lack of self love. And if you did, you wouldn't necessarily feel the same way. You wouldn't be putting these roadblocks in your own way. And it doesn't mean that you never love yourself. It could just mean that at this moment, there is something else that has your focus, something else that you are giving a priority over yourself. And that's a problem. And it's not showing yourself the amount of love and care that you should, because you deserve it and because you mean that much. Am I Angie? Well, and I think that's why. Yes, and I think also having friends that are in your court that can say, "Look, girl, you've been in junior college for 20 years. Are you sure college is for you?" But you know what I mean? Hmm. Right. Right. And again, like I said, right. But it's funny because it's like you telling school, like school, we in this complicated relationship. You keep taking my money but not giving me no degrees. I don't know that I can continue this relationship. I need a degree. Well, well, what I have learned so far in this journey is that you have to do things your own way and in your own time. Whether that means you're taking one class at a time, or that means you need to find a subject that you are really like drawn to and just do it. Because, and I think that this has been one of those things for me that has been the hardest lesson. Because I heard this in another podcast. They were saying that when we are sitting in this place where we are constantly trying to compare ourselves to somebody else, that's the gag. That's where we get caught. We're never going to get there. And I think back to myself, and again talking about seeing like some of the folks I started seminary with. Like I am so happy and so proud and so glad that they graduated. But at the same time, I'm like, I was in the same program that they were in. Why couldn't I get it like they got it? Not salty. I'm more sad. But again, that's that self sabotage. That's that. I'm doing it my way. You're right. And there's also those moments where I got to tell myself, wake up. Expletive deleted. Like, get your head in the game. Like, we need to get this done. And that's literally where I'm at right now, where, like, okay, of course, we're recording this podcast, but it's also to really jumpstart my spirit again. Because I know that lately I've been down and feeling a certain kind of way. And it's because it's like the world is so massive and there's so many things and there's so many ways I want to help folks. And right now, my life is telling me, you need to take care of yourself, boo. You need to put your foundation down now, boo. Like, you came up with some great ideas last year. Now is the time for you to really put down them bricks and that mortar and figure out where the freak your life is going. And that means get out of your own way. So, for folks that are listening out there, this is the lesson. We telling you to get out of your own way. There was a piece of information, and this story years ago. This came up for a coaching session I was doing with one of my former team members in my previous career of banking. Shout out to I'm gonna give a shout out to Stella wherever you are. If you happen to accidentally hear this podcast, we had this real deep coaching moment where she was talking about wanting to look at another position in our company at the time. I think she just was wanting to actually get a promotion, and we wanted her to have it, but she was letting her fear get in the way. And literally, I was sitting there and I said, "So, what would you do if fear wasn't in your way? What would you do?" And she had kind of tripped out because she had also seen that same thing at, I think she went to visit Google, and they had that actually painted on the wall, kind of for their employees. And she tripped out for a moment, and she was like, pretty much everything. Like, she would go for the position, she would want to do it. And, that was very moving for me because, again, I ask myself all this time, I ask other people this: what would you do if fear wasn't in the way? No, because fear is the thing that keeps us away. It's the fear of the unknown. Yes. And love, if you have love and you know that you got this and you know that you are that, you can do anything. And we are basically getting in our own way when we say, I'm not good enough. People are going to judge me. I don't know that I'm qualified. Although you've had the years of experience, or I can't do that. Well, not right now. That's you getting in the way of yourself because you are afraid of showing the world how great you really are. We call that the world. This is reality. This is life. Right. Actually, it's about time for us to wrap it up. Do you have anything that's coming up that folks should know about over the next month? Cool. And on my end, first in community, next month we do have another AB 617 meeting, which is about air quality. That's out here in the IE. They're actually in three different areas, but here in the IE, they're specifically focused on San Bernardino and Muscoy. So we'll be putting more information about that as the date comes closer. For myself, I'm actually going on a sermon tour. So during this summer, besides recording these podcast episodes, I will be showing up at different churches all over Southern California. I know I am going to be going to. Yeah, I'm on tour, girl. Me and Janet pass each other on the freeway and we just wave and say, hey. I know later on this month I will be in Santa Clarita, and then later at the end I'll be in LA. So I will be posting things about those preaching dates. Personally, also still just to put the word out about the situation that's happening in San Bernardino. Migrant folks are being dropped off, and um, that's a real conversation that we're going to be having coming up soon on the podcast. So, folks out there, please just keep your ears open for things that are happening, and just drop us a line sometime. Where was the most going thing? And this is Red Rock.